Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Hello, and welcome to our 30 West IP webcast update. Today, we are getting the chance to wrap up our series on looking at the electronic plotting applications that are available to us in the business aviation community. And we are glad to finally get to take a look at Scott IPC's Scott Plot. We've heard a lot of good things about this, so I'm anxious to see more about it. Today is 13 September of 2022, and as always, some of this information might have changed if you're viewing this at a future date. Now, before I pass the microphone on to Mitch and the Scott IPC team, I do want to review some of the controls that you guys have available to you. We're kind of limiting what we're going to interface with you with because of the number of folks, the large number of folks that we're going to have in our audience. You guys should have some controls that look similar to this. Everybody should have some way to control your audio settings. Before you feel like you have technical difficulties, we do encourage that you look at your audio settings and make sure that your computer is set up properly so that you can hear and see everything that you care to see and hear. We ask you do not use the chat or the raise hand during the presentation. We will be answering questions at the end of the session. So we're asking, instead of using the chat or the raise hands, we ask that you just submit your questions via the Q&A. If you submit your questions via the Q&A, we will take those in turn at the end of the session and try to answer those on the recording so that we can have this available for you guys later to view it if you're not able to view the whole thing today. We also have reactions available for you guys to use. If you choose to use those, you're more than welcome to do so. That's just some way to give us some verbal feedback during the presentation itself. Now, again, you guys are most likely on multiple platforms, so you should have some controls that look similar to that. For example, this would be an iPad platform, and so that's what your functions might look like if you're on one of those. So again, if you have questions, we certainly look forward to those. We want you to submit those in the Q&A, and we will certainly get to your questions at the end of the presentation. Now I'll turn it over to Mitch and let him introduce our guests.
Well, thank you guys for joining us, guys and gals, and we appreciate your participation. As always, this will be recorded and placed up on the YouTube channel. Special thanks to Shawn and to Phil for being part of this. We're absolutely really enthusiastic about electronic plotting, and they've got a great product, and we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to see what they're doing, some of the innovation that's going on there. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Shawn. So Shawn, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks, Mitch. Thanks, Joe. I'm Shawn Scott with Scott International Procedures. We have a training company that trains corporate and military pilots. We have with us today Phil Tyler, who's the head of business development, who's going to be walking you through, excuse me, hang on here. Excuse me, walking us through the high level of the Scott plot. It's been about 2.5 years in development at this point, and I think it's an amazing tool. I want to point out again, as Joe mentioned on the reactions, you'll probably want to use that little red heart a lot. When you see this thing, just keep hitting that red heart and throwing that up there. That'd be great. Anyway, let me turn it over to Phil. He'll introduce himself on who he is and where he comes from. We have in the background Wesley Scott as well for the tech side of it, but we shouldn't need him, I wouldn't think.
So again, we'll cover differentiators and main functionality. And then give you ways to reach out to us if you've got specific questions or if you'd like to see it in a little bit more depth. So that's kind of what you can expect from the presentation today. Please, again, ask all of the questions that you want. We'll do our best to answer them in the time that we have. All right, so let's get down to it. So as I said, more specifically, what we're going to see is we're going to look at some differentiators. We're going to talk a little bit about Scott International as it pertains to Scott Plot. We'll look at the goals that we had set up when we began this process to help give you some insight into what you're going to see in the app. We'll review some of the fundamentals of Scott Plot, and then we'll do the Q&A. Again, we'll give you contact information at the end to follow up. So, like I said, time is of the essence. So let's get busy. All right, so to To better understand what you're seeing with Scott Plot and the differentiations that you'll see and just the whole structure of what it is and why we do what we do, it's important to understand who Scott International is. So a large percentage of you may use or are currently using us for international procedures, but there may be people on the line who aren't. So we're going to do a brief introduction as to who we are before we get into the goals for the app. So, all right. So first and foremost, Scott International is a training company. That means we want to play a role in making our customers better. Training is one of the ways that we do that. Developing tools is another way that we do that. More specifically, international procedures is what we do, right? Where our expertise is in international regulations and operations, as well as the differences between operating domestically and internationally. So that's kind of the core of who we are and what we do and why we do it. Also, a big part of who we are is our relationships, right? We're a small company, and we value the input of others. We reach out and contact our customers on a regular basis so that we can learn more about their needs and also share in their experiences as they fly in these different airspaces. A lot of what we do is based on feedback from them. We also make a concerted effort to deal with the regulatory agencies that allows us to better understand what's published and in the regulations and the guidance. We also sometimes get involved in the process of regulatory development. So not only do we get to understand the letter of the law, but the spirit of what is published. And that's important in what you're going to see in the app today. So we believe our relationship with them and understanding what they were trying to accomplish when they wrote the guidance is captured in the Scott Plot app. Lastly, a large part of what we do is tool development. So since Scott International has been in existence, Shawn and the team have worked to develop many different tools to supplement and augment our training. Our Class 2 navigation envelope and our checklist is one of them, and the other primary tool that we've developed is the International Cockpit Reference Handbook. This tool is developed to augment the training, as I said, and better support the customers when you fly internationally. It's got a plethora of tools and information for doing just that. Now, I mention it specifically because A, it is a tool and shows our history of tool development, but B, it's the genesis of the Scott IPC app. It's the first function that we had built into the app. So as you can see, training and tools for international operators is basically in our blood. So this is who we are, and this is what drove us to create these goals as we look to develop the app. These are 10 overarching goals that you'll see peppered in to the application. The first is we wanted to use technology to facilitate best practices, right? Second, we wanted to make a tool comprehensive enough to benefit the frequent as well as the infrequent international operator, and also to allow operators the freedom to pick their own trip planning and flight planning sources. We didn't want to force anybody into a particular corner where it came to those things. A standalone app was very important to us. We wanted to make sure that we did not have an app that required us to interact at all with the resources of the aircraft. This keeps the app from having to be connected to a multitude of platforms and keeps us from tapping in and potentially causing additional expense to the user. So having a standalone product was a big part of what we wanted to do. Obviously, improving the paper process, being able to move to a digital platform just allows for so much more innovation and tools and situational awareness that we were excited about that part of the process. Number 5, we're looking to help standardize how plotting is done in different flight departments. Depending upon how your flight department is organized, or the size, or the number of bases you have, or just the difference in experience, you can have vast differences in the way people are plotting. And so being able to standardize that was something that we wanted, and it was also feedback we got from flight department managers that would be a big help to them. Obviously, a paperless situation is something that goes without saying with the electronic plotting system, but for us, we were looking at taking the whole process and making it paperless, not just the plotting chart, but all the tools and documents that you would use, and bring that into one app, so you didn't have to manage any other resources during the flight. Simplifying post-trip documentation and storage and retention. Again, through the electronic means, we wanted to be able to simplify that process and organize it. Increased situational awareness is, as a training company, and especially with, as we talk to people like Mitch and Joe and people on the regulatory side, anything we can do that can increase situational awareness, we want to be able to do. So a lot of tools you'll see in the app for that very purpose. And this, again, allows us to have users that are more experienced and less experienced, and use the tools as they fit within their own flight department. So number 9, we obviously need to build technology in to deal with potential issues with failures, right? So one of the first questions is, when you try to convince somebody to move from paper to electronic, is, what kind of safeguards are in place? So being able to secure the data and make sure that nothing is lost in the process was a big part of the app as well. And then lastly, the process itself lends to kind of a value add use of the app. And I'll talk more about that after we get through the plotting chart itself, but being able to get a bonus value when you purchase the app, just not using it on oceanic crossings, but there are other uses of the app. That was one of the goals of developing ScotPlot. All right, so let's look at the system and break it down a little bit. There are 3 constituent parts of the plotting system. The first we call the Preflight Wizard. This is a series of steps that the app walks you through to load and build each individual flight. So this is how you'll build your flight and all your flight documents into each individual flight. Once that's done, getting onto the plotting chart itself, here's where all the plotting, note-taking, position reporting, all that is done. We'll talk about forms and functions and features here in just a moment. And then when the trip is done, the third aspect of the plotting system is our flight bag. This is where pertinent data is stored and accessed during and after the flight. So the Preflight Wizard, the plotting chart, and the flight bag are the 3 components of the ScotPlot system that we're going to talk about now. All right, so the wizard itself, one of the goals was, again, it was really more of a specific than an overarching goal, was to make this a global system, right? There's oceanic crossings and remote continental crossings that are all over the place, not just in the NAV. So being able to create a global system meant we needed to have a global database, high load NAV database in the system. And before we start anything, we need to make sure that NAV database is up to date. So it's a full ARINC 424 database on 28-day cycle. So we just, as part of situational awareness, we make sure the NAV data is current and accurate before we start plotting. All right, then the next task, and probably one of the most important tasks in building the flight, is getting the flight documents into the app. Now, we use the term flight documents over the word flight plan for a specific reason. We want, as part of our process, to be able to to bring in all of the documentation that you get either from your own ops or your trip planner, depending on how your ops works, and have that handy all in one app while you're flying. So it's not just the flight plan that we're using. We want to have the weather and the flight plans and the permits and the NOTAMs and the winds and everything that comes with that package. We want to pull into the app so that you have access to it, and so that we can add to it through the flight. So this is important because again, at the end, when we generate this end of trip document, we want to give you as complete a document as possible in the event you need to review a flight, or heaven forbid you get a call on a potential G&A. You want to have as much documentation as possible. So the app itself has a number of ways of getting the flight documents into the app. The two that are tied directly to the app are the download feature you can see at the center of the screen. This is functionality that allows a scheduler, a dispatcher, or even a pilot to run and upload to our web portal the flight documents, and then the crew member individually downloads them. Now, this particular functionality is used more by my commercial operators than my GA folks, but it is an option. The vast majority of my operators import the flight plan that they get from their flight provider directly from email. And so importing that flight document is a simple process of using the Apple Share function and pulling it into the app. It's a simple 2 or 3 step process. And then we have, as you can see, we have the trip documents loaded into the app. Now, not everybody uses a trip provider, or not every trip do they do that. Sometimes people generate their own packages from time to time. So we do have built into the iOS, there are other ways to get documents into the app as well. So you can use the Apple Share function or the AirDrop feature. You can export documents from other apps on the iPad. So there's a plethora of ways of getting the flight documents into the app. And note that there are certain organizations that have very strict guidelines on their emails and being able to share attachments. So again, the app gives lots of flexibility to pull the flight documents into the app. So now that we've got them in the app, we're going to start building our plotting chart. All right, so pulling information off of the document was the most, pardon the pun, universal way of giving access to a wide range of people, right? So any other kind of technology that would tie us to a particular provider or a particular flight plan company would limit people's ability to use the app. So we decided being able to parse the PDF that's provided for the flight documents was how we were going to do things. So now the app will, as part of building the route, will look into the master document that we've uploaded, and it will search for flight plans. If it finds multiple flight plans, it will advise you, hey, I found this leg and I found this leg. Which one do you want to use for this plotting scenario? This also, not every flight do you have just one flight plan. Some you may have 2. Some you may actually have multiple plottings within the same flight. And the beauty of the system is you import the document one time and it's in there for leg 1, leg 2, however many legs you're going to use the app for. So the app will reach in and grab the route. You'll select it. And anytime we pull information off of a PDF, we want to make sure we go through a verification process. So the screen you're looking at, either landscape or portrait, has the route that we've parsed, right? You can see the waypoints, the nav aids, and the airways, as well as the master document. So here's where we would compare the route parsed by the app to the master document. We have some very sophisticated PDF software that allows us to grab data, but there are times when there are issues with parsing PDFs. So the beauty of what we're going to talk about today is there's always a backup in the event that there's an issue with technology. So in this case, if for some reason the route wasn't parsed correctly or a waypoint was missed, you can click into the route and add it and then recalculate it before we post it to the chart. So there's a number of fail safes that are built in the event that the system doesn't work as anticipated. So the route is built, we verify it, and when we're happy with that, we post it to the chart. One of the things we also do here is we can either on this page or graphically, we can establish our coast in and coast out, what's our oceanic entry and exit points. Those can be established, and from there, the basic plotting chart is ready to use, right? So now that goes in the background, and the wizard now leads us on to the next function that we're going to incorporate into the system. Excuse me. So incorporating a checklist was very important because, again, we wanted to have things that were accessible in the app, but also things that could be part of the final record. Don't want you to have to maintain a separate checklist in a separate file. So Scott, over the years, has developed its own international checklist, and it's a marriage of AC 91, 70, and NatDoc 007, plus a combination of our training experience and feedback from our training customers. So this checklist is built into the app. It is a phase of flight checklist. It is highly customizable, and we'll talk more about the functionality of the checklist when we get into the plotting chart. But for now, know that you can create customized ones. You can use the one that's in here. You can load whole new ones into the process. Flexibility is the name of the game here. So once we've selected the checklist we're going to use, we're going to move on to putting basic information for the journey logbook. So in the wizard itself, we're going to do half of the work. We're going to make sure the flight details are correct and up to date, which will include the aircraft, the company, the crew members, the city pairs. Again, we're basically setting the information that we're going to use for the journey logbook and the final documentation. So in the wizard, we're gonna set that basically up. One nuance we've built into this this process is the ability to manipulate the company and the aircraft information. A lot of folks that use the app are either contract full-time or they do some contract flying, and being able to use their app in a contract role and provide that to their to whoever's using them for their pilot services is something that they want to do. So we can, through the process, be able to amend the document to show the actual company that you're contracting for. All right, so we put the basics of the journey logbook in. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at pulling in our ETPs, right? So the app will again look into the master document and will look for ETPs, and it will auto parse them into the app. It will produce this the screen that you see here. Basically, it'll tell you how many ETPs it found. In the center, it says we found 9 ETPs in this document, and they're ordered based on the flight plan order. The individual ETPs that are parsed are down in the boxes below. Pretty simple structure there: the return, continue airport, the lat long, the distances, the type of ETP, and the color of that ETP that's going to be on the plotting chart. So again, task 1 here is to verify the ETP. So the master document that I use and I like to use has an ETP summary page in it that speeds the process up. If that's something you can do, great. If not, you'll have to look at the ETPs individually. But again, parsing data, we want to make sure that it is accurate. I'll not cover here, but we do have ways to edit and add information in the event that there are any issues parsing data from the master document. So once we've selected, we verified, sorry, the individual ETPs, in this case, there's 9 of them, you'll notice on the plotting charts that that you're seeing that in the top right 3 of the ETPs, there's a check next to selected or ETP. So these ETPs were selected by the user to post on the plotting chart. We did not automatically post ETPs on the plotting chart, primarily because of just the variation between flight departments and in airspace. Some will plot all of them, some will only plot worst case, some won't plot ETPs if they're within a certain proximity of each other. So we leave which ETPs to be plotted up to the user. In this case, we've selected the worst case scenario or depressurized scenario. And so they are plotted on the chart. Now, before we step out of this leg into the next part of the wizard, we have a unique opportunity here. A lot of my background is with international trip planning. And as a matter of course, trip planners will either use ETPs you give them or standard ETPs for an airspace. And if the fuel runs and the weather works, they're going to send that to you. And in probably 99% of the cases, there are no issues. But in certain instances, the wind that day is anomalous and causes the ETPs to look out of order or to be reversed. So a visual inspection of the ETPs as part of situational awareness is something that can be done here. Now, these ETPs you're looking at, you've got a Gander Kef, you've got a Gander Shannon, and you've got a Kef Shannon. They appear to be in logical order based on, again, the geography and the wind flow over the North Atlantic. But hypothetically, if you saw, say, the Kef Shannon ETP first, you know something was going on either with the flight plan or with the winds itself to create this anomalous situation. And you're going to want to understand what that is. So being able to access the master document, you can get over to your wind charts and take a look and see what is going on with the winds, and you can make a determination if you're okay with these ETPs, if you need revised ETPs. Again, this is where you get the operational control. You get to make that decision. This is just a place where you can do that review. And again, by definition, an ETP is meant to minimize your time and jeopardy in the event of a contingency. So making sure you got the best ETPs for that day's flying here's a good place to do a visual inspection and make sure you're happy with your ETPs. All right, so once you've done that and posted those to the chart, the next thing the wizard is going to have us do is looking at our Oceanic flight reminders. So we've built into the system as a way of situational awareness, but also understanding the different experience levels of and international flying with some of our operators. These optional reminders that are built into the system. It's tied to where the airplane is. And so it's meant to remind you of these 6 things. Prior to coasting out, prior to passing a waypoint, after passing a waypoint, prior to your 10-minute check, approaching a new FIR, and then lastly, capturing the wind drift correction. Now this is, again, you'll see things peppered in that are part of contingency planning. We want to capture the wind drift at the midpoint between our waypoints as part of contingency planning. In the event we got to turn around and go back, we lose GPS or whatever, we want to have that information documented. So wind drift correction is one of the options. Now I want to share a story that happened to one of our operators, actually 2 conversations. One was just the other day with someone that said, yeah, you know, I don't want to use that part of the feature and blah, blah, blah. And I said, that, you know, you are PIC, you got operational control, but let me share a story with you that we had a customer flying a state-of-the-art brand new aircraft and had a complete GPS failure. So it turned out to be more of a software issue, not a hardware issue, but he had to land and reset, and he was without his GPS. So the point is contingencies do happen, and planning for them is always a smart thing to do. So again, these are optional. Turn them on, turn them off. They'll give you an audible and a visible reminder in flight that things are about to happen, and help walk you through the CRM in the cockpit. All right. The last thing we're going to set in the Preflight Wizard is our sync option. So as we talked about before, data security and having backups is very important, right? And so the sync feature is a feature of the app that allows information to be automatically synced back and forth between iPads. So this functionality will allow multiple users to complete tasks while maintaining one master document in the cockpit rule, right? So somebody can plot while somebody tracks actuals on the master document. Again, you can manage that workflow. It allows for equipment issues in flight, or heaven forbid you drop an iPad. Again, it just allows some redundancy in the system, and it also allows for crew member swapping in the event of long haul flights, or you have a crew swap situation. So the sync function, we'll talk a little bit more as we get into the operational part of the app, but this is the last thing that you'll set before you get out of the wizard, which basically is establishing a connection between the 2 iPads and establishing who is going to be the primary device and who's going to be the secondary device. So more on syncing later. So we've built the plotting chart, we've got our checklist, we've begun our journey logbook, we've got our ATPs, we have everything into the app that we need to begin to operate the flight. So let's take a look at some of the high-level features and functions that are built in the app. I'll review some important functionality, then we'll talk about position reports specifically, 10-minute checks. We'll cover some of the situational awareness tools that are built into the app. We'll talk about making notes and annotations for the journey logbook. Then we'll talk about how you close a flight, generate an inter-trip document, and then disseminate that document. And then before we close this section of the demonstration, we'll look at a detailed journey logbook specifically so you can see what is involved in the contents of the journey logbook. So as we transition to the app, one of the first things I like talking about is our GPS sourcing. Because it drives a lot of the tools and functions that are in the app. It drives the breadcrumbs and the reminders and the moving around you see at the bottom of the screen, and there's a whole list of things that the GPS drives. But secondarily, you just can't use any particular source you want. iPad doesn't work that way. The iOS and our system itself is engineered to do 2 or 3 different things. As far as sources go for GPS signals, the first one I want to mention is for those aircraft that have the following 3 criteria met. You have your SATCOM equipped, you have the SATCOM direct router, the SDR, and if that SDR is hardwired back into the 429 bus of the airplane, then that router will broadcast on-ship position, and our app can pick that up and use that as the GPS source. Now, you may or may not know if you're SATCOM equipped, if you're hardwired into the 429, so you can either ask your maintenance folks, or a simple way to do it is the aircraft's fired up, you can open the app, and if you click on the green satellite at the top right, it'll show you the sources that it finds that it accepts. So if it shows you the SDR, you can use that as one of your GPS sources. Now, we're not going to get into the details of what are taught in plotting and international procedures, but know the philosophy is to have a backup, and B, to look at an independent source. So for us, we allow 2 independent sources for your GPS positioning. There are several external GPS pucks that we work with that we've got really good feedback on. The Bad Elf Pro is one, and the Stratus 3 is another. Now we are continually looking to build connectivity, and so on our app support page on our website is where the most current data is. If you want to know if something is supported by the app, and when we say supported, we mean recommended. So that's a good place to go. My development team do a really good job of keeping that up to date. And kind of on a side note, this is where they also show the recommendations for iPads themselves. Obviously, newer, higher powered iPads are more beneficial to use in a high powered app. So, and having an older app will affect your ability to use the iPad. So again, the app support page will tell you what equipment we recommend. The third source for GPS is the iPad itself. Now, depending upon who you talk to, some people rave that it's highly accurate, and other people will dismiss it out of hand. I find it, based on feedback with customers, it depends on the airframe, even sometimes what side of the airplane you're sitting on, what latitude you're at. There's all kinds of things that can affect the GPS signal from the iPad. So again, it's on the list. It will work. It's not our preference, but some people do swear by it. So again, it is there, and especially if you're looking to have something as a backup, right? Our recommendation is always have a backup. Another thing we'll talk about more in depth in just a minute is if we lose GPS, the system automatically along our route notes and prints a GPS failure stamp. When the signal's reacquired, the system will document that on the plotting chart, and also keep a record of the lat longs in the journey logbook. So we do measure and annotate if GPS signal is lost and reacquired. So I talk a lot about GPS sourcing, and I start here first because again, it drives a lot of the functionality in the app. But it's important to know that if you do for some reason lose GPS, don't worry. There's going to be plenty of places I'll show you as we go through the app that you can still use the app and still use the features and generate the in-the-trip document without having to convert back to the paper chart. So again, take heart. We're not out of luck if we lose our GPS. So, all right, the next important thing, and I'm looking at the toolbar at the top right of the screen. We looked at the GPS. Now we're looking at importing the flight document. Now, having that as part of the process is important for 2 or 3 reasons. One, again, we want you to have access to it inside the app. We don't want you to either have to use a paper copy in the cockpit or go to another PDF application on your iPad. We want you to have access to it here in the iPad. If you need to look up a NOTAM, again, permit, frequency, anything that's in the document, we want you to have easy access to that. Secondarily, we want you to be able to make your annotations. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, and have those annotations synced and saved to the journey logbook. And then finally, we want all of that to be stored in the master or in the journey logbook document at the end of the process. Again, we want this to be a complete document when we're finished. So having the master document and the flight documents in here is a very important part of the process. If you look across the top of the screen, the next icon over we want to talk about is the checklist. And so we talked a little bit about checklists, their origins in the Preflight Wizard. Let's talk a little bit more about how they're used in the active session on the plotting chart. So the checklist can be tied to the reminders or can be accessed just by clicking the icon. This is a phase of flight checklist, like I mentioned before. So you've got a flight planning section, an Oceanic dock section, pre-flight, off blocks, prior to coasting out, approaching waypoints, passing waypoints, and a coasting in section. Very detailed checklist. Now, again, we understand everybody's at different levels, different experience, and have different internal requirements for checklists. So we made this highly customizable, right? You take fields out, add fields in, put sections in, take sections out. We can even look to incorporate your own checklist if you happen to have one in your IOM. That's something we'll work with you on. And then lastly, you can have different checklists for different aircraft if you're flying multiple airframes, or in different airspace. If you want a different one for the NAT than for waters or for the PAC, you can have different checklists depending upon the airspace that you're in. So making it very customizable and easy to access in flight so that you can do your checks and note that your checks have been done. That was the primary purpose for what we're doing with. We also give you easy access to your master document if you need to bounce in and out into there to do something that is on the check. So again, making checklists easy and accessible and detailed is a big part of the process. So that's kind of some of the major functionality built into the app. Let's look at position reports and 10-minute checks. How does the app handle position reports? Well, there's two ways that it handles it. One is it can be tied to the reminders. So you're approaching Already in this case, it gives you a reminder. You select the reminder and it pops up in the position report. Or you can access the position report from either tapping the waypoint itself or selecting it on the moving route that's at the bottom of the screen. Either way, you can open up this position report manually. So again, multiple ways to do that. Now the report itself, you can see it captures the basic information from the flight plan and the 4 or 5 core fields that you didn't enter are the time at the waypoint, the flight level, the Mach speed, the estimate, and then if the time revises by 3 minutes or more, we need to update the estimate. You document that here. Remember, the app doesn't do any of the reporting for you. You're either going to do that CPDLC or HF or whatever way your aircraft is equipped to do so. But we're documenting what you've reported. All right. So you can also see kind of down at the bottom, there's some additional fields, our Oceanic authority, our primary and secondary HF, and there's an additional frequency box to enter other information in. Again, we'll talk a little bit about some of these extra fields as we look at the other pages that are associated with the position report. Page 2 is where you can document your fuel actuals and plan, and the app will do a running adjustment of the fuel. Also, altimeter information can be captured at the position report as well. We also have a MET page to capture the winds and weather at the waypoint. You can do that, and then we also give you the ability at the midpoint when you're capturing your wind drift. You can also capture your midpoint weather for again for contingency planning. So there's a lot of data here that falls into the non-required category, and so again we provide the fields. We allow you guys to decide what you want to use, but I guess a couple of things I want to tell you. A conversation yesterday where I was training on the app, and a younger pilot or newer pilot said, well, what do you recommend? And I said, well, if you have to sit in front of your boss or somebody with the FAA on a possible G&E situation, what do you want that journey logbook to look like? So you got to decide that for yourself. And then the second anecdote I'll share with you is we had a major flight department fly a NAT flight and get called in on a potential G&E. And within 30 minutes, immediately the director of operations was able to send over this document that we're going to go through in a minute. And the inspector was so impressed with the depth of information. This is a company that fills out everything in here. He was so impressed with the information that he called him back and said, all right, I'm going to pursue a potential equipment issue, not a pilot issue. And it turned out to be that it was an equipment failure. So anyway, the aviation manager called me and thanked me and said this was one of the smoothest interactions he's had with them on this kind of thing. And he also did reiterate that he believes, as do we, that the more engaged people are in this process, the less chance there is for error. So again, we give you plenty of places to put stuff. Do as you will here. All right. Last thing I want to mention is with position reports, again, if we lose GPS, then we can automatically pull them up, or we can automatically input the location information. We still have the FMS and hopefully our backup GPS source that we can lean on. So again, we're not out of the water. We're not in trouble if we do lose our primary GPS option. All right, 10-minute checks. Again, our can be tied to the reminders or can be brought up manually through the 10-minute check button on the left-hand side of the screen. The app, with a proper GPS source, can automatically post the GPS signal. Again, at that point, you can compare it to the FMS. Make sure the airplane is and you are in agreement. We also have developed a very in-depth scale to be able to zoom in down to 1 minute of latitude or longitude. We want to be able for you to see, are you on the route, or in the event you're flying an offset, to be able to note that as well. So the scale of the plotting chart allows you to zoom into that level. Other things about the 10-minute check is we do limit the footprint on the plotting chart. We try to do that with everything because the plotting chart can get convoluted if everything is on it. And so the icon is here, but the data is in the background. You can edit, add, delete by clicking on it. We show it here, and all that data is automatically stored in the journey logbook. Now, I've had a couple of customers through this process ask me, well, we like to do 5-minute checks, or we like to do 2-degree checks. Can your system handle that? Yes, there is functionality and flexibility built into the app through the drop on a pin functionality, which I'll show you in a little bit, that will allow folks that want to do something outside of the 10-minute check to do that very thing. All right. Lastly, again, if you lose GPS, you're not out of luck, right? You still hopefully have your backup, or you can grab the information from the airplane itself. All right, so that's position report and 10-minute checks. Let's look at some of the situational awareness tools that we have built into the app. We have a lot of them centered around the equal time points. So our ETPs are color coded as a way of minimizing clutter on the screen. For us, a red ETP is an engine out, a yellow is a depressurized, and a black is a at altitude or a medical. So we do that again to minimize clutter. We do provide you with the continue and return airport labels as part of that, the ETP as well. If you'll notice, the particular ETE, the engine out KEF to or getter to KEF is highlighted to show you situational awareness that's built into the individual ETP, right? So once it's clicked, you can see the aircraft is on the return side of this ETP. So from the aircraft back to the airport, it'll provide you a distance, a mag course, and an estimate based on the current your current airspeed. So it's meant there just to show you, if you want to look where we are in relationship to the ETP, you can select the ETP. Well, obviously, once you pass this particular ETP, it would show you what it was, what the distance, the course, and the time would be to divert onto Keflavik. So again, situational awareness, not meant to navigate by, but just to help you understand where you are in the course of the flight. We talked about in the Wizard, you have the ability to pick and post the ETPs that you want. So that leaves you the flexibility of dealing with pilot nuances and airspace differences. We talked about being able to identify potentially reversed ETPs and deciding if you needed to generate additional or other ETPs. And then one thing I'll mention and talk a little bit later on is we do have the ability to auto build ETPs in the event of a revised routing. Again, I'll talk about that when we get to how do we revise a route down a little bit further, but knowing that there's a part of what we teach in paper plotting is built into the app, and it's an auto build for these revised ETPs. So all of those are tools that are tied to the ETPs. Another situational awareness tool that we have built in, top left of the screen, you can see the leg icon, and when it's selected, there's two tools that are built into it. One is called Next, which are the white and blue boxes you see that are tied to the waypoints. Now, these are meant to give you some situational awareness information, basically the distance between waypoints. And then we also provide an initial mag and true course out of the waypoint for a couple of reasons. One is in the event of a contingency, depending upon your flight plan format, it may use a midpoint course, or it may use an average. You may not have access to the initial. And so in the event that you have a contingency and you might need to dead reckon, we want to have that information for you if your flight plan doesn't. Secondarily, if the route gets changed and it gets moved, we need to update information on our master document. And so again, the mag and true course for the revised route will be there as well as a way of helping you manage that information when you update the master document. So that is the next box. The ETE box is basically a running chronometer tied to the aircraft position. It'll give you a ground speed. It'll tell you where you are in relationship to your next reporting point. In this case, you're 22 minutes from your next reporting point, which comes due at 2250Z. The distance remaining is 220 nautical, and the waypoint you're driving up on is 5240. So again, just a running chronometer. Now, these are two tools that you can turn on, turn off at your leisure. They're there to help create situational awareness and deal with some contingencies if they happen to happen. All right. The reminders, a couple of things to note about them. This just gives you a look at what the reminders look like as one's active, and it'll show you the ones that are the systems that have already been completed. So this is what you would see. But also, we have a tool that will, in the event that you step away from the cockpit, could be a crew change or dinner or talking to a principal or resetting the Wi-Fi or whatever that gets you out of the cockpit. There could be some reminders that happen, and we do have a toggle that will let you know which reminders have been unactioned to this point. So it's just, again, another way to help you manage all the things that are going on, because we know plotting is not the only thing you're doing in the cockpit. So another tool to help with situational awareness. So those are the major tools for that. Now let's talk about the second half of the journey logbook process. We talked about creating the trip details in the wizard. Now we're going to look at ways that we can capture data in the system to make it show up in our end of trip document in our journey logbook process. So a quick overview of what that process looks like is we're in flight, we're capturing our position reports, our 10-minute checks, our en route notes, all our annotations, our breadcrumbs. There's a whole list of things that we're syncing, and I'll show you all those in just a minute. All of those are being captured into the journey logbook and synced automatically to the other iPad. So once we get to where you're either out of oceanic airspace or on the ground, we've got to end this flight, and we get a chance to enter last-minute information. We end the flight, and then we get the opportunity to disseminate the document. Now, again, I'm going to go into a little more detail about this down the road. And then the journey logbook is stored on the app and wherever you send it, and potentially upload it to the Scott portal. So that's kind of the process for capturing the en route journey logbook information. Now, in the flight bag is where we keep the active logbook information on the flight. And so here is where you can go to add other information into the record, right? We have, and these are all drop downs. So there's an actuals, which allows you to document your actual time and fuel, out, off, on, and in. There's a nav system initialization and verification option that allows you to look at documenting on the ground that the iPad, the GPS source you're using, and the aircraft are beginning in the same place. We can document our altimeters, our QNH, QFE, as well as our ramp, top of climb, coast out, and coast in altimeter settings. Now, the next four, the departure ATIS, departure clearance, oceanic clearance, and the arrival ATIS are very specific, and we'll cover those in a little more detail. But because sometimes getting that information can be cumbersome, we're going to show you lots of ways in which you can capture that information into the record without having to hand type it all in. There's a notes field that allows you to capture any other notes that aren't captured anywhere else in the app. We've got really plenty of places to note things en route. So our recommendation is to use it to document any notes at your departure or your arrival airport. This can be logistical or operational notes, could be something on the FBO, taxiway construction, preferred hotel, bad catering, fuel truck, fuel ticket. There's all kinds of things that you might want to capture as part of your end of trip briefing that you'll go back and do for your ops. So this would be a good place to do that. Finally, the last two sections, we give you an additional place to take photos that aren't tied to a specific other field. So if you wanted to take a picture of something else, could be something on the TCAS or something on the radar or some other window, whatever, any other photos you want to tie in, you can use your camera to take a picture. Or if it's something you want to capture a print screen of another app, you can do that, store it to the iPad files, and you can pull up the pictures from the iPad pictures. So if there's something on your ForeFlight or whatever you wanted to capture as part of the record, you can do that as well. Lastly, we give you the ability to add additional PDFs into the back of the master document as a way of making this a more complete document, right? So the goal is somewhere down the road, if you've got to pull this up, you have as much information to refresh your memory as possible. So if there's something you want to add in that's not part of what you get from your trip planner, for example, you get your runway analysis or weight and balance information from another vendor. If you can get it in a PDF or get it on the iPad itself and share it, you can pull that information in and attach it to the back of the master document. So again, our goal and priority here is to make this document as comprehensive as possible, to keep you engaged, but also to manage issues and in the event that there is a question later on about something that happened in the flight. So again, adding that in, these are all different fields and different information that you can copy into the record. We can also use our notes and annotations. We talked about some of this preliminary, but let's look at it in more detail. Annotations, again, being able to annotate on the master document to whatever level your flight department wants to. A lot of people are still transitioning from kind of an old way to a newer way, so they still want to do everything on the document. They want to show loading of the FMS. They want to show their trip details, times and burns, their actuals. They want to check the routings and the time and burn section on the top of the plan. Here's where they'll put their reroute information or whatever other information is dictated by the flight department. So tracking these annotations, and we're mentioning it here because again, all of these are going to be copied and stored as part of the journey logbook process. So annotating the master document is one way. We talked about a couple of the notes. We're looking at them in a little more detail here. The pin position node is the one on the left. Basically, you can see at the bottom of that dialog box, it establishes a position and a date time, and then gives you the ability to enter a note into the notes field, right? So again, you can use your Apple Pen or stylus. You can use the keyboard. You can scan text from off the instrumentation. There's all kinds of ways to get data into this data field box. So dropping a pin can be used for something you want to document right here and right now. Waypoint notes, again, are tied to waypoints. Again, anything that you want to tie to a specific navigator waypoint, there is a notes field. It could be, you could put your fuel and time actuals, any important communications, flight level changes. Some people do their position reports here. Again, it's very flexible, but know that you have a notes field that are tied to the individual waypoints themselves. Now, I said our goal was to use the technology to help you make as complete a document as possible. And this is an example of your departure ATIS that allows you to go out and scan an ATIS on the instrumentation with the camera, and the camera will pull the text and automatically plan it into the proper field. So, like I said, we want the document as detailed as possible, but we want to minimize the labor in doing it, and hopefully making it a little bit fun to do it as well. So being able to capture the data and use the technology is a big part of encouraging folks to fill out as much of the information in the notes fields as possible. So these are other ways that we can add information into the journey logbook process. We'll look at what that looks like from an output standpoint here in a minute. Quickly, we want to look at the different methods that we have of revising our routes. The primary one we have is in the event you get a reroute or a reclearance and you got to revise the route. We have a drag and drop feature that's built into the app that allows you to grab a waypoint. Once you do that, the app knows to query you as to, all right, if you're going to drag this thing, how do you want me to help you? Do you want me to snap it every whole degree, half degree, waypoint, or just allow you to drop it out in space? you tell the app, or it actually defaults to a primary one, and then you can drag the waypoint and drop it. The app will ask you to verify, and once you're done, the new route is there, and the old route is captured as part in the gray line that you see underneath. So revising routes is very simple. You do have also the option to go back. It doesn't work as cleanly, but if you want to go back to the wizard and to the builder route, you can edit the route directly from there. But again, not nearly as simple and as easy as the drag and drop feature. One last thing to mention here is, again, I said we can auto build ETPs in the event that the route gets revised. Now, I'm not going to run you through the process, but it is fairly simple. We'll show it to you in the demo if it's something you want to see. 4 bits of information you give the app, and it can automatically replot this information, the ETPs on the revised routing. So revised routes per your Oceanic routing or your clearance, and then if you get a revised a route via a direct to, the app gives you the ability to do that. Now, most of the direct twos you're going to get are going to be in the non-Oceanic portion, so you can decide if that's something that you care to update, or if you just want the breadcrumbs to show where you actually flew. But if you do want to change the route, you can either revise, do a direct to one of the waypoints that's on the route, which is the blue box at the bottom, or if it's a nav aid or a waypoint not on the route, you can input either of those two. The app will drop a faux waypoint wherever you are and take you direct to that point. So in the event that you get a direct to and you want to modify the route, you have the ability to do that. All right. Last, let's talk a little bit more about sync, because again, it's a major function in the app. You can see these apps were side by side as one person is making an annotation. It's being carried over to the other master document, and you can see the view screen that the pilots are looking at are completely different, right? One person may be plotting the actuals while the other is plotting, so having the tracks on is important. So again, it shows the flexibility that we can connect to the multiple iPads. You have a primary and a secondary, as you can see at the top of each of the screen. Again, keeping in mind the single master document rule. These rules are easily reversed, and also the data's, I'll use the term instantaneously. I mean, it is pretty quick that the data is synced over. And one of the special things we believe about our sync function is the amount of data that we sync, right? I told you that you will load the Preflight Wizard into the primary, and then you'll sync it with the secondary. Everything will be copied over. In flight, whether it's the primary or the secondary, the following items are synced automatically: your trip documents, your route of flight, your route edit, your checklists, all your journey logbook entries, your ETPs, your ETP edits, your position notes, your 10-minute checks, your position reports, any annotations on the master document or the plotting chart, your current GPS position, your GPS loss and gain timestamps, your position breadcrumbs, and your wind drift correction. All of this information is synced instantaneously over to the secondary iPad. Again, with the goal of bringing some comfort to the fact that there's a lot of functionality and a lot of data entered, and we're not going to lose that data, and the sync process allows that to happen. Okay, so we've flown our flight, we've done our position reports, our 10-minute checks. We are ready to close this flight out. Let's take another more detailed look at what that looks like. So in the flight bag, we get is where we find our journey logbook information, and here's where we can enter our last bit of actuals, right? Or any other notes that we want to make, right? Before we save this and close it out and generate the journey logbook, we get a chance to enter last minute notes. From there, the end of trip document is generated. Now, I'm going to show you that in more detail in just a sec, but we're going to view that, review it. If we like it, we're going to move on. If we don't, we're going to close and make whatever additions, corrections we need. In the event that we do like it, now we get to decide how we disseminate this, this document. And so one of the primary options is using the Apple Share function at the top of the screen. So if you've got an app on your iPad, you can share this document to it. Could be an AirDrop, could be email, Dropbox, SMS, Google Drive, lots of options for disseminating this document. So you as a flight department can decide where and how you want to disseminate this document to, and you can send it to multiple places if you like. There's no restriction on how many different places that you send it or save it. Once you've got it where you want, now you've got to close this flight out because the app still needs to know the flight is closed. So the closeout procedure, again, select the closeout button and it gives you a couple of options. One is closeout, which only saves it to the flight bag of the app. And the second is close out and upload. And in that situation, it'll upload a copy of the journey logbook to me if you want us to house a copy of the journey logbook. We provide that service and that storage at no extra charge. Like I said earlier, a lot of my GAs don't do that. But if that's something you guys want, that is something that the app will allow you to do. So that is closing the flight out and disseminating the flights. All right, so let's look at the detailed logbook in a little bit more detail. All right, so we start with the header page, the basics. The first two are really basics of the flight, the registration date, city pair, operator, that sort of information, information on the iPad, who is using it. Page 2 talks about where we synced, which was the primary device, which was the secondary device. Next, we're going to look at the journey logbook information that we had the chance to put in during the flight. The top is just the flight details that we looked at in the wizard. You can see there's a place for our actuals, our time and our fuel, our nav system initialization and verification. Again, verifying either the FMS against the GPS or against the manual GPS or against the IRSs if that's your option in your airplane. So again, just noting that where we started and where the airplane thinks we are and the app thinks we are virtually in the same place. Our altimeter checks, again, our QNH QFE and our number 1 standby and number 2 altimeters, all the departure ATIS clearance, Oceanic clearance, arrival ATIS information is there. Your route information along with the coast in and coast out. Now this will be the final route. So if you've changed the route, this will be the final route flown, and the original route will be kept as part of the visual plotting chart. So route is stored, coast in, coast out are stored. Our waypoint notes are stored, what waypoint, what time, what the notes are. If we use the pin position notes, where it was dropped, when it was dropped, what the note said. All of our 10-minute checks are shown, what waypoint it's the 10-minute check for, what that long, when it was recorded. Our GPS timestamps, if it failed and was reactivated, again, we note the date and the time and the source of the GPS failure and reactivation or reacquisition. All of the ETPs, the ETPs are also documented in the final record. Now the plotting chart is obviously the graphic is too big to put on a standard size paper. So what we do is we take a snapshot beginning at the departure and going all the way across the route to the destination, and it includes everything that's on the plotting chart. So this, you can see we've got our route, we've got our breadcrumbs, we've got our 10-minute checks, all of our ETPs, our tracks are automatically loaded in, and so the app would show this series of snapshots from departure to arrival. The position report forms are all captured in tabular fashion, and then any and all photos that you take are captured here as part of the document. I will note that we do have some pretty sophisticated software that allows us to maximize or minimize the size of the document we're going to generate. You don't have unlimited amount of pictures, but you can use the photo option quite a bit, and our app will still make it where it's a document that can be emailed. The tracks are here. The plotting chart, the annotated master document is here, and then any other user documents that you want to add into the back end of the document is all here. So this is all that's captured as part of the journey logbook process. So like I said, at this point, you confirm or go back and add or edit. Once you've confirmed, you get the opportunity to share this document with any of the apps on the iPad, and then close the flight out. So that's the journey logbook process. And that takes us off the plotting chart part of the app. Lastly, we've got the active logbook. Some of this you've seen. Here's where we store the active journey logbook in flight. Once the flight's closed, these fields are zeroed out. So here's where you'd go in flight, but after the flight, you'd have to go to the archive journey logbook. In between those, we do store the document that you've imported, A, as an independent record, but B, if you want to open it up there by itself, which gives you a little bit more room to annotate than you might if you want to annotate it as part of the plotting chart. Either way, you can annotate the master document, but you can do it in the flight bag if you want to just have the flight plan open. Archive logbooks are there. You can open them, share them, delete them, upload them at a later date. So after you've disseminated them, they're there. You will manage the database in here. You'll delete these when you want. After you've disseminated it, wherever you're going to send it, again, it's up to you. Create a policy of when and how to clean this information up. Document section, really kind of twofold uses there. If the tracks are stored there, but we also give you the ability to pull in documents, say your aircraft docs or your crew docs. If you wanted quick access to that information, say you're getting to visit one of the lovely SAFA inspectors and you're showing him the closed journey logbook. If you just want to click on documents and show them anything else, like I said, crew docs or aircraft docs, you can import those in. And then a new feature will allow you to pull in a document, say a SAFA checklist, annotate on it, and then save that to the back end of the master document. So again, another way of just making sure that document is complete as possible. So that's the document section. Checklist is where you can, the checklists are maintained. You can edit, create, manipulate on the plotting chart as well as in the flight bag itself. So lots of flexibility there. Lastly, because we're a training company, we want to make sure we offer enough training for folks to understand and use the app for all it's worth. We understand people train differently and learn differently. So there's really three methods of training on the app. The first is a user's guide that's built in to the app. It is a touchscreen, pretty easy, walks you through the major functionality. Secondarily, we have a training module on our web portal that walks you through in a more detailed fashion the use of the app. And fairly soon, we're actually going to put some training videos into the app itself that you can watch. That's not there yet, but that's coming. So user's guide, external module, and the third option is we do offer a Zoom type training with me and my folks. If you've got, like I said, a large number of crew or you learn best hands-on, you can schedule a time to walk through the app together and ask whatever questions come about through that process. So again, we want to make sure that folks know how to use the app, so we overdo it with the training. All right, so before we get to Q&A, I want to talk about your Ginsu knife, your bonus feature that comes with the app. So based on the way the app works, by pulling in the master document and by putting the breadcrumbs, tracking the route, letting you make notes, using the checklist, adding notes, and then creating an in-a-trip document, and then disseminating that document, I'd say probably 9 out of 10 of my customers are using the app on all their international legs, not just Oceanic plotting, but they're using them on all their legs as a way of standardizing their international docs. I mean, you got to keep that information anyway, so why not keep it all standardized? And so as a way of standardizing that and then storing it all in the same place, right? So the app allows you kind of that bonus feature of using the app on all your international legs as a way of streamlining that process. All right. I am officially done talking now. So you'll see on the screen ways to contact Scott IPC. If you've got specific questions, you can email or call. The website is where you can go look up more information or request more information. So again, Joe's going to leave this up for a little bit, and then for now we can go to Q&A. So thanks for your time, everybody.
Very good. Thank you very much for that, Phil. We do appreciate that. I do have a few questions that we'll wrap up this session with, and then we'll call it done. So to start off with, first off, again, though, thank you guys very much for that. That was an excellent, informative presentation, Phil. Thank you for that. And Roger is asking, from an EASA perspective, he's saying EASA regulations require that the software goes through an operational risk assessment process. What is the ORA process performed, and is the document available to submit to the regulator?
Thank you for the question. You may want to unshare Phil's screen. It's got a filter. So
a little bit longer for you.
EASA is developing a risk assessment tool called a RAT to assist in this. That hasn't actually even been formalized at this point. So if you're familiar with it and you have found out that it has been formalized, I'd love to hear from you. But the FAA has gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, and they've done a risk assessment, but EASA has not as of this point. I will submit to them probably at the end of this month with the next production build for the entire app, but as of yet, it has not been reviewed by EASA. But our goal is to get it obviously reviewed for the commercial operators.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Joel is asking, can your flight bag post-flight be sent to their lead, or can their flight bag post-flight be sent to their lead international captain for audit purposes?
Gosh, absolutely. In fact, there's multiple redundant mechanisms to transfer the journey logbook after the flight. The journey logbook, once you close out, you'll have been synced. So the primary will break the sync. He'll do a closeout, and then he'll action it either for email to whoever, the entire journey logbook. He can put a copy up on the portal. He can just leave it resident on his iPad. The secondary iPad, once the sync is broke, can close out his own copy, which is identical to the primary, and that would go resident on his, or he could email his out as well. So there's tons of way to get it to whoever you want to get it to, very simply.
Okay.
And again, Phil's screen is still being never mind. Okay.
Yes.
See,
taking it now. No worries.
Gotcha. That's fine.
Thank you. All right. Excellent. Another question is anonymously asked, do you have to take the Scott IPC course in order to use this app?
Yeah, we have you sign up for life for that. No, absolutely not. It's a standalone deal. We have commercial operators that obviously have their own internal training. They're not about to touch our training. So we wanted to make sure we had the widest dissemination to help folks as possible. So you don't absolutely have to be you absolutely do not have to be a customer of ours for training.
Awesome. And the last question I see is from Edmund, and he's asking, does the app need to be open and active in order for you to work/plot/track the flight? Does it have to be running in the background?
I would say the answer to that is yes. It has to be open, and you don't have to have it primary on your screen. It can be in the background, and it's going to calculate all the stuff. You'll open it up to do your journey logbook and do some stuff on your plot, then open up whatever else you want. So it'll continue to work, and you don't need internet connection for it to do its job. You don't need a connection to the internet. You need the internet, obviously, to load it with the database and pull down the tracks, which we check, every so many minutes for revised track messages that would get posted. So the answer to that is it doesn't have to be in the foreground.
Okay. Court is asking, sign in a bit late, so if you've covered this, no worries. We'll try to answer the question for you. Does the app allow you to plot if you have numerous entry/exit points? For instance, you fly through a remote area, then you go into radar contact, then back into a remote area.
Yes. So, and that's quite frequent. Let's take a flight out to Hawaii, and then they're going to go further west. So you may have an area that's continental. So your coast out and coast in would be just before you get to that continental airspace. And then after an hour or so, I'm coasting out again. So you can set up multiple coast out, coast in waypoints for a route. That's a pretty common scenario to do it. And if you noticed on the depictions that Phil had, some of the route was magenta and some of it was green. Once you set your coast out and coast in points, that section of the route is green, and then it turns magenta, so you can do multiple times. Yeah.
Very good. And we have another now. If you choose to close out your journey logbook later in your hotel room, how do you capture the tracks that were active during your crossing?
So we recommend closing out at the FBO. Because some guys have forgotten to close out for like a day or so, and it causes them we just have to regenerate the track, but all that information will be captured in there and won't be switched. That's used unless you waited 12 hours, and then maybe the second track message is populated. So we recommend you close out at the FBO when you shut down, on it.
John is asking, what is the minimum memory requirement and iPad version to run your app?
Okay, I'm going to have Wesley answer this, who's off camera. Okay, he's checking this out right now. Let's see. We're pinging somebody to get that answer on the memory requirement.
Okay.
And the version. We'll get back with you, John.
So while we're waiting on that information, I think that's more of a compliment than a question. David says, thank you for the presentation, Shawn. Impressive.
Well, appreciate it. We have a lot of folks working on it, and they've worked really hard at it for sure. So,
okay.
And
all right.
We'll find out about John. Yeah,
the one question about John, and that's all we have left. So memory and iPad version requirement.
Okay, it looks like which iPad models and iOS versions do we recommend? iOS 14 to iOS 15.5. The iPad mini 5th generation and higher, 7.9 inch. The 6th generation and higher, 10.2 inch. iPad 3rd generation and higher. The iPad Pro 1st generation and higher, 11 inch. And the iPad Pro 3rd generation and higher, 12.9. I don't know if you have either of those. And that was just for, okay.
And Shawn, I did mention that is captured on our website under app support. So anytime you need to know about that, you can go to our website and find that information. So,
will you put that back up again so they can see that?
I didn't have a slide for that. I just pointed them there. So
okay, yeah, scottipc.com. Okay.
And John, that'll be the answer to your next question. scottipc.com to contact them for a demo. So I'll go ahead and close that one out. If you want a demo, contact them directly. Raul is asking for flights from Mexico or from another point in Europe to enter the US. The app can fill out the international arrival or departure EAPIS question.
At this time, it cannot. It cannot.
Okay. So sorry for that, Raul. Not the answer is no.
It's, yeah.
Now
It's not a bad idea. We could put it in there. We just have to interface with some folks.
good. How many individual iPads can be synced at a time? I'm thinking in the case of having an augmented crew member.
We're beta for more than 2, but presently it is 2. So once we're confident that we can use triple or quad iPads without any disconnect in any way, for the guy in the back to watch what's going on, he'd be read only, but presently it's 2.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much. Shawn, Phil, thank you guys. Those are all the questions that we have, and we are over a 90-minute point at this time. So I think we will go ahead and wrap it up. And we do really very much appreciate you guys joining us to round out our series on presenting to everybody what options are available on electronic plotting.
Yeah.
Well,
Joe,
thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Joe. And thank you to all the attendees. And thanks, Phil.
we really appreciate it, Scott. You and Phil
Yes.
taking the time. And just as a note, first week in November, we're going to do a short webcast on a North Atlantic update. So stay tuned for a notice on that. So thanks to all of you who attended today.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everybody. You guys enjoy your day and be safe out there.
Thank you, guys. Mitch, Joe.
You're welcome. Thank you, Shawn.
All right.